Hello, welcome to Presume Technologies. I am Venkat. This is part 51 of SQL Server. In this session, we'll learn about recursive common table expressions and the problems they solve. Before continuing with the session, I strongly recommend to watch parts 49 and 50 of this video series. I have this employee table which has got employee ID, name and manager ID columns. Since a manager is also an employee in that organization, we store both employee and manager details in the same table. Now if I ask you who is the manager of Mike, you will look up the manager ID column, which is number 2. Number 2, you will then take that value and look up in the employee ID column. Number 2 is Josh, so Mike's manager is Josh. So we are taking the manager ID column and looking up another column in the same table. So you are referencing the same table. So it's called as a self-referencing table. Now if I ask you to display employee name along with their manager name, then we have to join this table with itself, and we know that joining a table with itself is called as self-join. And we have spoken about self-joins extensively in part 14 of this video series. Okay, so this is a simple self-join query. So obviously if I just want to display the employee names along with their manager names, we can make use of a simple self-join. Okay, and if you look at this, Josh manager ID is null. Okay, which means Josh does not have any manager, so it basically displays null here, but we are displaying superboss with the help of isNull function. So if manager.name is null, then we are replacing that null with superboss. Okay, so and we have spoken about different ways of replacing null values in part 15 of this video series. Okay, so the reason why we talk about this example here is that we are going to extend this a little further, and then we will see how to solve it using a recursive CTE. So if you just want to display employee name along with their manager name, you can simply use a self-join, and that would solve what we are expecting as far as the output is concerned. But let's say I want to display the employee name, their manager name, and along with that I also want to display their level in the organization. Okay, now if you look at this organization chart here, Josh is the super manager because he doesn't have a manager ID, which means he's at the top of the hierarchy. So, and then to Josh there are two direct reports. Tom and Mike, are the direct reports of Josh. How can we tell that? If you look at Josh, his employee ID is number 2, and Tom and Mike, their manager ID is number 2. So obviously Tom and Mike report to Josh. And then Tom in a similar fashion has got 3 direct reports. Mike has got 2 of them, and Pam has got 1 direct report. So if you look at the hierarchy, Josh is at the highest level and Sam is at the bottom of the hierarchy. And so if you look at the levels of these employees, Josh level is 1, he's at the top, so that's why level 1. And if you look at Tom and Mike, they are level 2. So Tom and Mike, you can see employees Tom and Mike, their level is 2. Along the same lines, Pam, James, Simon, John and Mary, level 3. And at the bottom of the hierarchy is Sam, who is level 4. So right now I want to display employee name, their manager name, and their level within the organization. Now to achieve this, we can use recursive CTEs. Using recursive CTEs, the code will become a lot easier. Okay, let us see how to solve this using a recursive CTE. So this is the recursive CTE. I mean, we have spoken about how to create a CTE itself in the previous session, so we're not going to talk about the basics of CTE here. We will see how to create a recursive CTE. What is a recursive CTE? A CTE that references itself is called as a recursive CTE. Now in simple terms, forget about everything that you see on this slide. We know that we create a CTE using with keyword. So with employee CTE. So here employees CTE is a CTE. And then this is obviously having 4 columns: employee ID, name, manager ID, and level columns. The reason why I have put level in square brackets is because level is a keyword in SQL Server. If you want to use a keyword as a column name, then you will have to wrap that inside these square brackets. Okay, so here basically employee CTE is a CTE. And if you look at the CTE query within the as block here, we are again referencing the CTE. Within the CTE, we are referencing the CTE. So this kind of becomes a self-referencing CTE. Okay, now let's understand what we are trying to do. Now if you look at the output, what we are expecting, we want the employee name, manager name, level. Okay, but then the way we are implementing here, if you look at the first look at this CTE itself. So employee CTE, which has got 4 columns as, and look at this first query is pretty simple to understand. We are selecting, obviously our CTE is returning 4 columns, employee ID, name, manager ID, and level. So our select query should also return 4 columns, employee ID, name, manager ID, and 1 as level. We hard coded that one, and I'll tell you why in a short while. So select these 4 columns from TBL employee where manager ID is null. So if you look at this query, from this table TBL employee, we are selecting employee ID, name, manager ID, and then a hard coded value of 1 from TBL employee where manager ID is null. So for which record is the manager ID null? For Josh record, manager ID is null. So we only get Josh record, and Josh is the super boss in the organization and he should get a level of 1. Okay, so we are selecting the level of 1 for Josh. That's hard coded here, and we only get Josh's record because we are checking whether if it is null. And who has got null? Only Josh. So we get only Josh's record and his level will be 1. Okay, so that's the first query, which is very simple to understand. And then we are using union all operator. Now when you use a union all operator, the number and type of columns that are returned in the first select query should match to the number and type of columns returned from the second query as well. So if you look at this one in the select query, so if you look at from the output perspective, we just finished retrieving this row. Now we have to retrieve the rest of the rows and increment their levels as they move down in the hierarchy. We should increase their levels. Okay, so for Tom and Mike the level should be 2, and for the rest of the these 5 people it should be 3, and for Pam it should be 4. And to do that, what we are basically doing is we are selecting the look at this, look at the join query first. We are joining employee CTE with TBL employee. Okay, so we are joining the CTE with TBL employee, and in TBL employee we have got all these rows. Okay, so what's going to happen now, we are going to recursively loop through TBL employee, and look at this. From TBL employee, from this table TBL employee, we are selecting 3 columns, employee ID, name, and manager ID. But the 4th column, look at what we are doing. We are taking that from employees CTE dot, so if you look at this is the employee CTE, and it's got a level column. So employees CTE dot level plus 1 to the existing level, just add 1 more. Okay, so we are referencing that level column from the CTE itself, and then we are getting employee ID, name, and manager ID from TBL employee. Okay, so we require these 4 columns from this query as well. We are getting those by joining TBL employee with employees CTE. And look at this on clause is another interesting one. So you are looking up the manager ID column in the TBL employee table, and you are matching that to employee CTE dot employee ID. Okay, so that's the CTE itself, and you're doing a union all. So this first select query will give the manager, super boss details, and then this recursively will retrieve all the other members, incrementing their levels. Okay, and then so this is just the CTE. Okay, so if you look at the output, if you look at the columns employee ID, name, manager ID, and level. Okay, so this CTE will have all of them. So let's see just that part now. So if you look at the CTE itself, so until now we have discussed this. Okay, so let's comment this section for a bit, and let's say select star from this employee CTE. So whatever CTE we have constructed, we are selecting all the rows and columns from that CTE. So let's execute that. And look at this. I get this output: employee ID, name, manager ID, and level. So we are getting the level as expected. Now all we have to do is, instead of displaying manager ID and employee ID, I just want name and a manager name. Okay, to do that we can simply use a self join. Okay, so we can join this CTE with itself now. And that's pretty simple. Just like how you join a table with itself, you can join a CTE with itself, because a CTE is also a temporary result set. So for that purpose, what we are doing here, so let's uncomment this. So if you look at this, we want the employee name and manager name. So if you look at this employee CTE, we are giving it two aliases. One is called as EMP CTE, the other one is called as manager CTE. We are giving those aliases, and from employee CTE you are selecting the name, and that's nothing but employee name, and then you are checking from the manager CTE, you are selecting the name, and you are checking because a manager name can be null for the superboss. So that's why instead of displaying null, we are replacing that with superboss, and we are giving this column an alias called manager from TBL employee. And obviously we require the level as well, and you can get the level either from employee CTE or manager CTE because it's the same. That's it. So this part is pretty simple. All we have to understand here is the second part, which is a little confusing. You're joining TBL employee with employee CTE, and then you're incrementing the level. That's the piece that we need to understand. So obviously now if we execute this, we should get the data that we are expecting. So employee name, manager name, and their level. On this slide you can find resources for ASP.NET, C#, and SQL Server interview questions. If you want to receive email alerts when I upload new videos, please subscribe to my channel. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.